Colnebridge was first mentioned as a settlement in the year 1533. Most of the mills and workmen's cottages were flattened in the 1960s. Today the old community that once was the vibrant core of the village is just a memory. The remaining houses of Colnebridge are, by comparison, somewhat more genteel. It is now little more than a road junction. The story about the mills of Colnebridge is usually overshadowed by the saddest chapter of all, the tragedy of 1818. On Valentine's Day morning, while it was still dark, 17 young Kirkeaton girls who had worked through the night perished in a raging inferno. The fire began in the ground floor storage room after a boy misplaced a candle and the flame caught hold of some loose cotton. The appalling loss of life in such circumstances shocked not only those in Huddersfield and the surrounding district but the entire country. It also moved Parliament to debate legislation that might prevent a repeat of the disaster. In spite of the tragedy, however, life had to go on. Money meant survival, and with the Industrial Revolution gathering pace, large mills began to oversee the demise of the cottage industry. Colnebridge became home to a large cotton spinning plant owned by Thomas A & Sons. The mills occupied both banks of the River Colne and were served by the John Ramsden Canal. The A family lived at Colnebridge House, a spacious mansion situated less than a quarter mile from the workplace. The home had previously been under the ownership of Thomas Atkinson, who was a resident at the time when the mill was destroyed by fire. The houses were cramped, but the most notorious were the landings, a large tenement block where deprivation was, by today's standards, unimaginable. My granddad, Gordon Copeland, used to tell me that the rooms were lit by gas, which was supplied through a meter and fed by 2 old pennies, under 1 pence today. It provided for the wall lamps and the gas stove. There was no hot running water, bathroom or inside toilet. Washing facilities were limited to a stone sink for pots and clothes, and for bathing a tin bath had to be filled with water that had been heated up in a boiler inside what was known as a range. This was a cast iron stove that surrounded the coal fire. The toilets were known as bin tubs. They were housed at the end of the block. There were only 7 to provide for the men, women and children who occupied the 15 tenement dwellings. After heavy rain or when the snow melted, the river would rise and engulf their houses, leaving whole families stranded in the bedroom until it subsided. When this happened, rodents were frequent visitors, which added to their woes. With large mills right on the doorstep, the air vibrated with the incessant clatter of A's spinning machines. Here generation after generation thrived and were generally happy. At the turn of the 20th century, the village had 3 shops, 2 places of worship and a pub, the Spinner's Arms, which was demolished and rebuilt in the 1930s. The pub survived the closure of the industries and continued to be popular with locals. It was extended in the 1990s to house a restaurant and was renamed the Royal and Ancient.